One thing I don't see people talking about at all when it comes to the whole Iran and the nukes in the war is that it's really not bad that multiple countries, multiple nations have nuclear weapons. Now, I know that sounds contradictory, but this was something that I specifically learned in a few different global security classes I took during my degree program. And it's not something the average American thinks about because I sure shit didn't think about it until somebody brought it up to me. So let me explain. It's the concept of mutually assured destruction, which basically means multiple countries having nuclear weapons is better than one or maybe two countries having nuclear weapons, specifically the powerhouses. Because that means if at any moment somebody says, hey, I'm going to press that big red button and launch a bunch of nukes, everybody can launch a bunch of nukes, which means the entire world would get blown up and nobody wins as far as that goes. Whereas if one, maybe two countries have nukes, nobody can retaliate, nobody can defend themselves. So what does that mean? Well, it means that global security, this global safety, is actually better off with more accessible nuclear weapons than if we severely restrict nuclear weapons. Does that include Iran? Well, I think yes, to a certain extent it does. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why we don't really want Iran to have these massive nuclear weapons that they allegedly have. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But when you think about the scale of the US and you think about the scale of Iran, they would be absolutely stupid to try and nuke the US because you would probably need either one gigantic ass nuke or you would need multiple, whereas with Iran, it would take very little to blow them off the face of the map. A couple other things we have to consider is we're not really going to stop people from having nuclear weapons. People are going to figure out how to have those. People are going to figure out how to keep it a secret. Like, this technology is going to happen, whether we like it or not. That's just kind of how society is. That's how human beings are. We also have to take into account we have very good technology and defense systems to not only identify nuclear weapons, but destroy them before they ever make contact with the US. A lot of other countries also have these systems as well. So while nuclear weapons are scary, they're not necessarily as big of a threat as the government would like you to believe. And also, while we're on the topic, let's just say everybody decides to press their big red buttons and everybody decides to launch their nukes. Well, at the end of the day, we're all going to die very quick. So, theoretically, there's not going to be a real problem there. Like I said, I do conceptually understand why we don't want Iran to do that, especially because in the Middle East, they have a history of blowing things up in the US. But also, we haven't exactly been good to them either. So, it's kind of a quid pro quo, give or take situation here. The other thing I want to point out is, what's different about Russia having nuclear weapons, or China having nuclear weapons, or North Korea developing nuclear weapons compared to Iran? The reason we're not targeting those nations is because it would be much harder for us to actually win than if we were to target Iran. So why is it that the president is specifically targeting Iran? It's because they're smaller, and he believes that they are inferior, which technically isn't wrong considering the scale of our country compared to the scale of their country. Their artillery capabilities compared to our artillery capabilities. But at the end of the day, he's placing nuclear weapons above the lives of hundreds of innocent civilians. And that's the hard part that I have, especially when you look at the fact that, historically, we're actually not as in danger as this big nuclear terror is going on. It's almost like the Cold War all over again, except the reason the Cold War and the reason that everybody was racing for nuclear technology was because they didn't want only one country to have that, because then that one country held all the power. Let's also not forget that the only country that's ever actually nuked anybody is the US. And why did we do that? Because we had the technology first. Once other countries started getting that technology, we kind of couldn't afford to nuke people.